Discover 7 incredible and transformative punishments for witches that shocked history revealed. The words echoed in Virginia's mind as she positioned herself among the towering shelves of books in the Willow Creek Library. As a single mother grappling with the demands of her 10-year-old son, Ethan, and the responsibilities of being the town's dedicated librarian, the stories whispered from dusty pages of the archives felt like a haunting siren call, beckoning her to face something terrifying within herself. Seated at her desk, she immersed herself in the tome, its yellowed pages rattling with tales of innocent women tortured and condemned. The chilling accounts of trial and punishment reverberated through her mind, unsettling her comfortable narrative. The essence of these harrowing tales felt like a mirror reflecting the insidious fears bred within her own tight-knit community. Virginia sensed the weight of history's contempt, a reflection of persistent biases that still simmered below the surface, and she felt an urgent need to challenge them. But with each word, fear coiled tighter around her heart. Would she be met with resistance, even anger, for daring to reveal truths better left buried? Before she could fully acknowledge the tension mounting in her chest, the thought of organizing workshops to provoke dialogue surged forth. Educate, inspire, ignite change, she fervently rehearsed as she padded between the aisles. But could she truly disrupt the status quo? She wrestled with the conflicting desires to honor her late mother's teachings about loyalty to family and community while feeling the suffocating weight of internal dissent against a suffocating tradition. Virginia paused, her fingers resting delicately against the aging spine of the book, the swirling emotions threatening to tip her into uncertainty. The thought of presenting workshops filled her with hope, yet it also sparked panic. What if her intentions were perceived as a repudiation of the town's established history? What if, in her pursuit to advocate for the silenced, she fueled the fires of alienation for her and Ethan? She bit her lip, heart racing at the prospect of facing the local historical society's steadfast guardians of tradition that may view her as a misguided intruder. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. She shook her head, trying to dispel thoughts of hostility and judgment from her neighbors. But those fears nestled deeper when she uncovered her shocking family connection to a witch executed centuries ago in Willow Creek, a truth laced with personal stakes. The weight of her ancestors' judgment bore down, making her question if she was honorably pursuing justice or recklessly stirring ancient animosities. Would revealing this link alienate her from those she sought to educate? Each detail she peeled away from her research exposed a tangled web of history, revealing horrors that resonated with her own fears of being marginalized. All the while, Ethan observed from the back of the library, his curious gaze a reminder of the life that depended on her ability to push past the growing storm of doubt. As tension mounted around her, Virginia's heart hammered. A confrontation loomed on the horizon, brewing with every whisper and glare from townsfolk resistant to challenging the past. She took a deep breath, her resolve muscle tight, prepared to fight for recognition as she glimpsed the fragility of understanding. But would that battle cost her the very connections she cherished? Just as she felt the ground beneath her shift, a bitter truth settled into her gut. She was on the brink of becoming the very outsider the town seemed so eager to reject. The morning light streamed through the high windows of the library, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air as Virginia reviewed her notes. The weight of her contemplation pressed heavily against her pulse, each clock tick sounding like a countdown to her impending decision. She mentally replayed conversations with her late mother, instructions about the importance of keeping the peace in their tight-knit community, which seemed to clash violently with the courage required to reveal uncomfortable truths. The duality of her heritage hung over her like a storm cloud. Part of her yearned to dive into the past, but another part was terrified of the lightning that might strike as she did. Determination bubbled up alongside her anxiety as she realized that perhaps her fear was a signal of her need to act rather than retreat. She took a deep breath, her mind racing through potential formats for the workshops. A series of talks could easily educate, but what if interactive dialogue could provoke deeper reflection? The prospect of curating a multimedia exhibition piqued her interest. Displaying visual histories and survivor accounts could spark empathy, couldn't it? Yet, images of faces contorted with anger flashed in her mind like a warning. The cognitive dissonance could drown her idea before it even floated to the surface. The idea of confronting the historical society loomed large in her mind, yet a flicker of resolve ignited sparks of creativity. What if she framed it not as an assault on tradition but as a celebration of history itself? Every story deserved to be told. She envisioned panels chronicling the life of her ancestor, displaying her unjust condemnation as a cautionary tale of bias. Would this approach ease the resistance? A hidden part of Virginia blossomed with the realization that she had the power to redefine the narrative. However, doubts flooded in, washing over her newfound vigor like a tidal wave. What if she failed? Visions of the townspeople's disdain settled in her stomach. What if Ethan became the target of their backlash? He was already sensitive, often caught between wanting to please her and seeking acceptance from his peers. She had battled with these fears since his birth, the constant disruption of outsiders' judgment pouring into their lives like ink on fresh parchment. Virginia's thoughts spiraled down, but she anchored herself with clarity. She was not alone in this endeavor. Drawing strength from her bond with Ethan, she understood that her fight for justice was also a fight for his future. If she faltered, she would not only betray herself, but him as well. The deeper she delved into her ancestors' history, the more she saw her own narrative intertwining with those lost to time. The quiet murmur of the library surrounding her transformed in an instant, shifting toward the clarity of purpose. She caught a glimpse of a sign that read "Knowledge is power," a motto she once passed daily without a second thought now resonated with a sharp symphony of understanding. Virginia felt bolstered, as if she had unearthed a hidden strength, long buried under the responsibilities of single motherhood and societal expectations. With a determined shove, she pulled the tome closer and began making fleeting connections between the tales of yore and her own fears. The tears of despair from centuries past began to blend with a growing resolve within her. Just then, the soft ring of her phone broke through the silence, and she caught Ethan's name flashing on the screen. As the moment of truth unfolded in front of her, anticipation mixed with dread. The time had come for an honest conversation with her son, one that would shape their shared future. But could she fully articulate to Ethan the complexities of legacy and justice without causing fear? As she hesitated, the urgency of her decision loomed, and the path forward began to crystallize before her. Would they face this tumultuous sea together, or would fear drown them both in the name of tradition? Virginia stared at her phone, heart racing as she contemplated the impending conversation with Ethan. She felt a pull between her instincts as a mother and the unexpected weight of truth she needed to share. What would it mean for him to hear that their lineage bore scars of injustice that still whispered in the corners of their small community? The ringing faded, replaced by an unsettling silence as her fingers hovered over the screen, uncertain. Would she be able to protect him from the repercussions of revelations that had haunted their family for generations? All at once, she realized that the choice was not only hers to make, it would shape Ethan's understanding of his identity and their shared legacy. Gathering her breath, she swiped to answer. "Hey, sweetheart," her voice trembled slightly. "Mom. Are you busy? I need to talk about something." His words tumbled out, tinged with a youthful urgency that pierced through her anxiety. "What is it?" Virginia settled into her chair, determination coursing through her. She wouldn't allow her fears to overshadow this moment. "It's about school. I don't know how to tell you," but he paused, hesitating as if searching for words in his fluttering thoughts. "Some kids were saying stuff about us about what happened ages ago. They think we're weird because of what you've been researching." Pain stabbed through her at the implications these careless words carried. She had hoped this conversation would reveal courage, but instead, it only reflected a fear she wished to shield him from. "Ethan, I need you to listen closely," she said, her voice firm despite the anxiety bubbling beneath her composure. "What we are learning isn't just history. It's our history. It's important. Did it really happen? Did your family, were they witches? The innocence of his question, bitten with a dash of incredulity, made her heart ache. To him, the past was a fantasy and a nightmare rolled into one. Yes, it did. They were persecuted, misunderstood. Virginia struggled to find the right words, only to feel the past blurring her present. But we have a responsibility to understand that, to look at it more deeply, not just to accept what we are told. Ethan remained silent, his breath audible on the line, and she could almost visualize his mind racing. The fear of rejection flickered in her like a candle flame, fragile, but steadfast. What if everyone freaks out if they hear it again? He finally asked, vulnerability threading through his voice. What if they think I'm like that too? Virginia felt the weight of his trepidation settle in her chest. She'd spent too many nights fighting for him against her own fears, and now those fears lunged back, whispering that this was a battle she couldn't win. Yet, their shared legacy hinged on confronting this dilemma head-on. Some may not understand, but there are also those who will listen once they know the truth. We can't hide from it, Ethan. Her words flowed with urgency. This wasn't merely a conversation about the past, it was about the strength to confront it. He sighed heavily, a sound that betrayed a mix of worry and thoughtfulness. What do we do then? I mean, how can we make it matter? The spark of connection ignited at his question, offering a path for collaborative action. We talk about it, educate others, and possibly even involve our community in ways that honor those stories. That's how we redefine the narrative, Ethan. She could feel a small shift, the first steps toward bridging a gap that had loomed ominously. Perhaps empowerment would forge resilience after all. As they ended the call, a resolve settled in her. This was just a beginning. She could harness this momentum and channel it into actionable steps. What once felt like an avalanche of fear transformed into a cascade of possibilities. Virginia glanced back at the tome, heart racing. She was ready to pitch her idea to the Historical Society. This time, she would step into the room confident, with Ethan at her side, redefining their narrative together. And what began as a whisper of the past now issued a bold challenge. How could she engage her community without instilling fear, while advocating for the truth? Determined, she opened the book and began to jot down specifics for her proposal, her pulse quickening. The time had come not just to face a community filled with apprehension and whispers, but to weave her voice into the tapestry of history they would ultimately embrace together. What if this revelation opened a door to both acceptance and understanding? Virginia placed the book down, adrenaline coursing through her as the realities of the task ahead pressed heavily upon her. Each word she had written deepened a sense of urgency, a conviction formed in the crucible of her fears. This wasn't merely about a presentation or a project. It was about crafting a narrative capable of altering her community's understanding and, by extension, Ethan's perception of his lineage. She returned to her desk, the clutter of notes and historical references crowding her thoughts. Each piece of information held stories, tales of oppression and resilience. Virginia felt her breath catch. Did she have the courage to step forward? Each revelation about their family past along with whispers of absolute truth begged for recognition, and perhaps, redemption. As she paced the room, her thoughts spiraled. Would they meet her with open minds? The faces of her neighbors, so familiar and comforting, now glared back at her with unspoken judgment. This was a transformational moment, and both she and Ethan had to be the catalysts. She imagined herself standing in the local historical society, the eyes of the committee scrutinizing her every move. What would she say first? Would it be the shocking details of centuries-old persecution? Or the raw emotions tied to generations of women, silenced and shamed? Every option felt charged with potential backlash. Who would listen? Who would reject? Virginia knew she had to confront these fears directly. Immersing herself in the texts she had gathered, she identified key themes. There were common threads, a tapestry woven from the fabric of fear and misunderstanding. The complexities of past injustices demanded to be navigated with strength and an approach that could resonate on a personal level. Then, as she jotted down strategies, a thought blazed brightly amid the chaos of ideas: storytelling. The revelation felt like a beacon. If she presented her family's story through a narrative lens, it transformed from mere facts into relatable experiences. Could she intertwine the unpalatable truths of their past with an appeal to empathy? Ethan's voice echoed in her mind, questioning how they could make it matter. Right there, in that moment, Virginia understood they had to give voice to the ancestors' silenced stories. She began drafting ideas for engaging formats, perhaps an interactive workshop. A community dialogue infused with forgiving truths. The possibilities stirred a thrill within her heart. She imagined the workshop setting, curious eyes wide in anticipation, listening as she passionately shared their family's history, allowing the community's fears to dissolve in the potency of revelation. She could teach them to confront their anguish, to shed light on the darkness that shrouded the past. It wasn't just about acceptance, it was about embracing the whole narrative. With renewed resolve, Virginia pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and sketched bold points: confront the myths, inspire thoughtful questions, encourage personal reflections. Each bullet became an affirmation she was not only the herald of her family's legacy, but also a pioneer for a deeper understanding. As she worked, anxiety wrestled with exhilaration. What if this led to resistance? Would they meet her with hostility? But she also recognized that vulnerability was intrinsic to this journey, both for her and for Ethan. Would her commitment to honesty fortify their bond? Just then, her phone buzzed again, the screen illuminating with a message from Ethan. "Are you okay, Mom? You seem really stressed. Should we talk more?" A wave of warmth enveloped her at the thought of his concern. It reminded her of their initial conversation, the terrifying yet hopeful synergy they ignited. She resolved to involve him more in this process, not just to shield him, but to empower him. Virginia took a deep breath, mentally shifting gears. It was one thing to have a plan, it was another to step into action. She needed to frame the narrative not just for the community but for herself and Ethan, embracing the legacy. That came with both its shadows and its light. With a resolute smile, she began typing a response to Ethan, inviting him to brainstorm ideas for potential activities together. The path ahead was uncertain, laden with challenges, but it was action that would define their journey. As she pressed send, the tension hung palpably in the air. She wondered if the time had truly come to face those who would oppose them. Would they have the strength to endure the backlash? And so, with her heart racing, she picked up the book again, ready to delve deeper into the stories that could pave the way to their victory. What other secrets lay hidden, waiting to be unearthed? Virginia stared at her screen, the ghost of her doubts hanging over her. Had she been impulsive inviting Ethan into this tangled web? Uncertainty clawed at her as she recounted the gravity of their undertaking. She wasn't merely preparing for a community dialogue, she was standing at the precipice of history with only her words to keep her from falling. Suddenly, Ethan's response chimed in, illuminated on her phone like a beacon. "I'm in. Let us make it impactful. We can do this together." His enthusiasm cut through the thick fog of her apprehensions. She felt a pang of pride swell in her chest. How had he transformed from a boy burdened by curiosity to a young man ready to confront the difficult chapters of his heritage? She wished she could muster even half of his courage. Encouraged, Virginia poured herself a cup of coffee, the familiar ritual offering a momentary assurance. She could feel the warmth of the mug in her hands as if it were a shield against the cold weight of the task ahead. The sun was setting outside, casting shadows across her workspace, reflecting the gravity of the shadows she intended to illuminate. She had to dig deeper into the narratives that lay before them. With a renewed sense of purpose, she strategized the workshop format, an interactive space where historical figures emerged as characters, inviting the community to step into their shoes. She envisioned emotional landscapes where her neighbors could explore their own discomforts, challenge their preconceptions, and perhaps, find a sliver of empathy buried within. Virginia recognized that by sharing her own vulnerabilities, she could redirect the focus from blame to understanding. Midway through her planning, an unsettling thought crept in. Could they even handle the reality of their shared history? Or would the revelations push them away, closing doors that she yearned to open? Each name she scribbled onto her notes felt like a spark, and yet she questioned if her community was ready to engage with the difficult truths of their past. Discomfort ignited resentment. What if revealing the past only served to alienate them further? Her mind raced, she felt on the verge of some critical epiphany. What if, rather than presenting the stories dryly, she invited different perspectives? Carefully curating her narrative to showcase not only the pain but the triumphs. Articulating how resilience paved the way. Not every ancestor's tale was heart-wrenching, some were filled with strength and brilliance. How could she navigate the balance of honesty without resorting to discomfort? The weight of her thoughts pressed down, much like the looming deadline of their presentation date. She grabbed her notebook, feeling the pages, searching for clarity amid the chaos. Would her revelations force a rift, or could they bridge gaps that span generations? Then, just as doubt began creeping back in, she remembered Ethan's tenacity. They were united in this quest, not merely as mother and son, but as two voices carrying forward a legacy. She quickly texted him again with her idea, "What about stories of strength?" The reply came as a rush, "Yes. We can show how they paved the way for us. It can be powerful." Their collaboration reignited her determination. If they were to take on the challenge, they had to stand together, shoulder to shoulder. The doubts began to dissipate, replaced by the warmth of possibility. Virginia braced herself for the difficulties ahead, but this time, she organized her thoughts with newfound clarity. They would confront the struggles, but they would do so in a way that unveiled resilience and hope. It was imperative to dish out the complex, bittersweet histories while emboldening their audience to reflect upon their own pasts alongside her family's narrative. As she drafted the final outline for their workshop, a sudden knock at the door made her jump. Virginia paused, her heart racing, wondering who would be visiting her now. The sound was unexpected, even jarring in this moment of intense focus. Could it be resistance already? She thought. Anxiety flooding back with forceful urgency. A flicker of apprehension mingled with curiosity. Who would come for her today? Virginia took a moment to steady her breath, forcing herself to confront the uncertainty that accompanied the knock. Each heartbeat drummed in her ears as she rose, curiosity and trepidation weaving together into a tapestry of emotional anticipation. Would this visitor support her or shatter her plans before they even began? As she opened the door, her resolve solidified. The figure standing before her was familiar yet unexpected, Amelia, a neighbor who had often commented on the lack of historical dialogue within their community. Virginia respected her passion for historical preservation, yet their interactions had often been laced with underlying tension. "Amelia!" Virginia exclaimed, surprised but intrigued. "Virginia, we need to talk," came Amelia's straightforward response, a tone that held neither warmth nor malice. Taking a deep breath, Virginia invited her in, mind racing ahead to the potential implications of this encounter. She could easily project her worries onto Amelia's presence. What if she was here to criticize? What if her doubts were mirrors reflecting Virginia's own? Once seated, Amelia wasted no time. "I heard about the workshop you're planning with Ethan. I think it's an admirable endeavor, but I worry about its direction. You need to approach this carefully. The past is more volatile than people realize." The gravity of the words settled into Virginia, propelling her into an inner dialogue. She had felt the weight of history pressing down on her, but had she truly grasped its nuances? "I appreciate your concern, but don't you think we need to face the truth rather than sidestep it?" Amelia leaned back, a considered look on her face. Truth can be a double-edged sword. Igniting discord at this stage could alienate relationships you might want to cultivate. You want engagement, not outrage. Virginia opened her mouth to argue, but closed it just as quickly. Her immediate instinct was to defend her vision, that of enlightening voices through shared experiences, but Amelia had a point. Engagement was delicate. Dialogue required balance, and she was still navigating through her ideas about resilience and strength. Perhaps this was a moment to reflect rather than react. "Let us say you're right. What would you suggest?" Virginia asked, her curiosity piqued. This was no time for defensiveness, this was a time for growth. Amelia hesitated before responding. "Highlight the narratives that resonate, the moments in history that forge connections. People appreciate personal stories. Show them the humans behind the histories, the motivations, the dreams." Virginia noted the difference in tone. This wasn't simply critique, it felt like a call to cultivate understanding rather than just exposing painful truths. It opened new avenues for exploration. How could she frame her ancestors' stories not solely as accounts of struggle, but narratives of perseverance and aspiration? "Maybe we need to redefine the framework," Virginia pondered aloud. "It's about moving from suffering to resilience. It should invite the community to personally relate rather than defensively distance themselves." Amelia nodded, a glimmer of respect crossing her expression. "That's a great shift. You can guide them to empathize, rather than merely confront. But you must also brace for resistance. Some may not want to hear it, and you need to be ready for that pushback." Virginia felt the tension mount. Resistance could threaten their progress, of that she was certain. Yet the thought of retreating simply made her resolve harden. She needed to anticipate challenges as opportunities for further connection. Would she be strong enough to weather the backlash if it came? As their conversation continued, Virginia gained more insights, her ideas blossoming into actionable strategies. But as the discussion deepened, a creeping fog of doubt began to encircle her thoughts again. She couldn't shake the feeling that Amelia's visit was merely the beginning of a series of challenges ahead. In that moment of clarity, she resolved to adapt her approach, framing not just the stories she wanted to tell but considering how to navigate the unexpected hurdles along the way. With every revelation, she felt that she was sharpening her purpose, preparing for a battle she had already committed to, albeit a battle filled with dialogue, not division. Yet just as she reached a crescendo of inspiration, the impending thought loomed large. What if those challenges turned into outright confrontation? How would she handle it when faced with strong opposition, especially within her own community? Clenching her jaw in determination, Virginia knew the time had come to prepare for something beyond mere storytelling. She would have to fight for a shared understanding. The following morning, Virginia sat at her kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window illuminating the scattered notepads and index cards filled with her evolving thoughts. She had barely slept, the weight of Amelia's words mingling with her ambitions to carve out a space for truth in their community's historical narrative. Determination surged within her, yet instead of clarity, she found herself besieged with questions. How would she approach the dialogue she envisioned? How could she prevent misunderstandings from spiraling into confrontations? With a steaming cup of coffee in hand, she opened her laptop and researched engagement techniques, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she absorbed articles on conflict resolution and effective communication. The importance of storytelling echoed in her mind, yet she couldn't overlook the inherent risk of stirring emotions that ran deep. How to balance vulnerability and strength? Her mind drifted back to an elderly woman she had interviewed months earlier, a wellspring of history who had recounted tales of vibrant community gatherings, festivals filled with music and food, moments of joy that overshadowed hardship. Virginia had been captivated by those narratives. Could they not serve as a bridge to connect the past and present? Suddenly inspired, she scribbled a new outline on a notepad, focusing on the richness of shared experiences rather than mere historical accounts. She imagined inviting community members to contribute their own stories, illustrating how their ancestors had shown resilience against adversity. This was far more enthralling than mere struggles. It emphasized the human condition, showcasing triumph alongside trials rather than pitting one against the other. As she crafted sentences, an unexpected wave of excitement flowed through her. This shift felt right. She was not discarding the painful truths but recontextualizing them within a tapestry of hope. With renewed purpose, her thoughts turned to logistics. How could she facilitate this exchange of narratives effectively? The haunting specter of opposition lingered at the periphery of her mind. Virginia knew resistance was inevitable given the histories woven into their community. What would she do if her vision incited anger or defensive reactions? Her breath hitched momentarily at the thought. Would she falter or push through, advocating for understanding amidst discomfort? Deciding to assemble a core group of supportive individuals, Virginia reached for her phone and texted Ethan, proposing a meeting to brainstorm her ideas. He had the insight and experience she respected, and together they could build momentum that would soften the approach to their audience. As the hours unfolded, Virginia meticulously laid out the framework for their meeting. She would present not only her revised ideas but also a contingency plan for potential pushback, the emotional reactions that might erupt from unveiling difficult histories. How would she articulate those stories without pushing others away? The weight of uncertainty remained, but so did her conviction. This was not merely about sharing history, it was about creating a dialogue that fostered empathy, a shared understanding that could endure beyond the moment. Could she be the catalyst for transformative conversations? Just as she was about to close her documents, a notification popped up on her screen. An ominous comment on a local forum caught her eye. A vocal opponent was rallying against the very kind of dialogue she yearned to promote. A pulse of dread coursed through her, igniting adrenaline. This was no small contest, the fight for understanding had just begun. Her heart raced with an intoxicating mix of fear and purpose. Virginia straightened in her chair, her fingers hovering over the laptop. She would have to engage directly. Would she rise to the challenge? As she strategized her next steps, an urgent realization struck her: resistance was not just a possibility, it was already here. But every confrontation could also serve as an invitation to refine her vision and her approach. What if she turned her vulnerabilities into strengths? How far was she willing to go to defend this burgeoning narrative of resilience? Determined now, she took a deep breath and readied herself for the fight. The time for passive reflection had ended. It was time to claim her ground and engage with those who stood in opposition. The discussion, the pushback. Virginia felt she was on the brink of something crucial. With her heart racing, she had no choice but to embrace the conflict head-on. How would she quell that looming confrontation, and what personal growth awaited her in the face of dissent? Virginia's fingers danced over the keyboard, a blend of adrenaline and anxiety fueling her. The looming confrontation with her critics felt uncharted, a territory both daunting and filled with promises of transformation. She opened the local forum's thread, each comment radiating hostility. They were sharp, cutting, and dismissive, yet inside her festered a smoldering resolve. Now, the spark of her commitment was palpable. She knew each word they issued was calibrated to incite anger, but it was her responsibility to shoulder the burden of truth, to invite her community to see beyond the narrow scope of their grievances. With each insidious comment she read, her mind sharpened. Defensiveness, she reminded herself, often masked a yearning for recognition. Could she not hold space for that? This aware mindset inspired a shift in how she approached her response. Instead of a rebuttal laced with counterarguments, she decided to share a story. One she had collected from that elderly woman, a tale woven with hardship, yet threaded with resilience, a narrative that echoed through generations. This was the story that could open hearts, a gateway to understanding and potentially, empathy. Sitting back, she allowed the words to flow. In our shared history, there exists a powerful narrative of survival, she typed. Sometimes, in the face of division, we can discover bonds that unite us. Let us explore how our past has endowed us with strength rather than further entrenching our divides. She hesitated only briefly before hitting post. Her heart thudded as the words vanished from her screen, entering a digital realm fraught with uncertainty. Would this initiative soften the hardened stances opposed to her ideas, or would it merely fan the flames? Days slipped by as she engaged with peers in hearty dialogues while remaining watchful of the forum's responses. Each exchange burgeoned with the potential for growth, testing her resolve and forcing her to consider how to maintain her narrative without losing her authenticity. Ethan joined her efforts, working behind the scenes to amplify her message. Together, They analyzed feedback and refined their strategies, shaping how they could present their gathered stories. Nonetheless, doubts crept in. Late nights often found her revisiting the harsh words that floated freely online, their scorn echoing through her mind. She wrestled with her own vulnerability, questioning the efficacy of her approach. Was attempting to engage genuinely with those who dismissed her ideas naively idealistic, or was it a gateway to potential collaboration? One evening, overwhelmed by a combination of fatigue and fervor, she reached for her writing notepad, pouring her turmoil onto the pages. Her pen scrawled notes on resilience, the themes of her outreach, and potential paths to unveil the community's narratives without triggering defensiveness. An unexpected call interrupted her thoughts, breaking her focus. It was a friend, a fellow historian keen to discuss the growing tensions and her budding project. As they spoke, her apprehensions morphed into excitement, the discussion invigorated her. "Virginia, it's not just about the stories," her friend urged. "It's your voice, the clarity you bring. Sometimes, it's not what we share but how we present it. Don't lose sight of the power of personal connection. Let each narrative strike a chord." Later that night, her friend's words reverberated within her. A new plan emerged from this realization. What if she curated personal storytelling workshops, inviting community members to share their experiences directly? She could fold an entire lives into their overall narrative, rephrasing the past within present discussions. As she began drafting an outline for this workshop, a chat notification popped up on her phone. Ethan had spontaneously scheduled a meeting. A tight knot of tension took shape in her stomach. Were they truly ready to face dissent? Their conversation would define whether or not they would gather the courage to confront not only their opponents but also the doubts lingering in their hearts. The thrill of anticipation mingled with anxiety. She placed her laptop aside, her mind racing with the potential of the upcoming meeting. It was time to clarify her agenda to Ethan, fine-tuning her vision ahead of the challenges they would inevitably confront. As she prepared for this pivotal discussion, a critical thought surfaced. Was she ready to reshape not just the community narratives but also her perceptions of her own capabilities? Gathering herself, she knew one truth remained: she was on the brink of something transformative, yet the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Could she harness her fears and potential oppositions into a powerful moment of change? As the clock ticked toward her meeting, she felt it a growing urgency to not only advocate for understanding but to confront her own evolving identity as a storyteller in a time of conflict. With a decisive breath, she straightened her papers, ready for what was to come. Would she find her voice amid dissent, or would her aspirations falter at the first sign of backlash? Virginia arrived at the cafe earlier than planned, an intentional choice to ground herself before the meeting with Ethan. The cafe's ambient noise swirled like a backdrop to her racing thoughts, a comforting blend of hushed conversations and the clatter of coffee cups. Yet, her mind fixed on one undeniable reality: every moment brought her closer to a confrontation that could set the tone for her future. As she stirred her coffee, the gentle motion felt symbolic, a rhythmic tug against the chaos brewing within her. Clarity had become a precious gem amid the swirling doubts, but it was still fleeting. With each second ticking by, she grappled with what she truly wanted to convey, a vision rooted in vulnerability, but emboldened by ambition. When Ethan arrived, he radiated a buoyancy that immediately softened her apprehensions. He slid into the seat across from her, the sun casting a warm glow on the table between them. "I've been thinking about your idea," he began, a smile breaking across his face. "It's brilliant. Personal storytelling could bridge the gaps we're facing." His enthusiasm reignited the flickering flame of excitement within her, but it was still shadowed by a lingering unease. But what if they resist? What if they view it as just another initiative to dismiss? She countered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "We won't know until we try," Ethan replied, leaning in slightly, insistent yet reassuring. "Every effort necessitates confronting resistance. But I believe in what we're doing, and I know you can lead this." The weight of his faith in her started to carve out a space for renewed determination. Virginia felt a thrilling sense of responsibility. For so long, she had viewed the detractors as adversaries. Now, they were fragments of a larger narrative needing re-articulation. But was she truly ready? "Let us dissect this further," she proposed, gesturing for Ethan to pull out his notes. Together, they began crafting the outline for the storytelling workshops. What emerged felt alive, each point carefully considered, each detail infused with intent. Virginia mapped out the central themes: vulnerability, authenticity, and resilience, concepts that echoed with universal truths yet tailored to strike an intimate chord with her audience. As they structured session flows, a thought lodged in her mind: what if each workshop served not just to share stories but also to unearth hidden emotions, igniting catharsis and connection? She began to realize that her fears of opposition could transform into stepping stones for crafting impactful moments. Instead of sidestepping her critics, she could merge their stories with others, weaving a collective past that resonated beyond their discord. Ethan watched her energy shift, enthusiasm blooming. "You're onto something," he encouraged, his eyes bright with shared vision. The workshops could spotlight not just tales of hardship but resilient journeys forward. They foster healing and solidarity. Her heart swelled at the prospect, a bloom of confidence pulsing through her. She could be the facilitator of change, spearheading discussions that encouraged raw honesty rather than defensiveness. Each unfolding story could be a bridge toward understanding. Once the initial structure of the workshop was sketched out, Virginia felt a surge of empowerment. They had abandoned defensive posturing, and now they were strategizing on how to construct connections. Still, doubts flickered, nudging at her resolve. The intense contemplation of whether they could properly tackle conflicting perspectives loomed over her like an ominous cloud. As they wrapped up their session, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. Yet, deep inside lingered the question: how would they handle the inevitable backlash, those who would scorn their attempts, who would view vulnerability as a weakness? Clarity began to settle, and she had to confront her own narrative about fear. If she could face it, the workshop might flourish and inspire others to do the same. This realization, this shift became her new anchor as she prepared to step boldly into uncharted waters. But as she and Ethan stood to leave, a new notification buzzed on her phone, drawing her attention. A critical comment had come through on her initial post, a direct challenge questioning her intentions. The air crackled with tension at the sight of it. The moment of truth was precipitating faster than she could imagine. Would she defend her vision now that the storm was brewing? Virginia's heart raced anew with the anticipation of conflict. This was the beginning of her calling, yet the descent was materializing much sooner than she had expected. Could she summon the courage to stand for her beliefs? As the cafe door swung open behind them, she felt the chill of reality. Would it be enough to simply share stories, or would it spiral into a battleground defining her own evolution as a storyteller amid adversity? Virginia stood at the front of the local historical society meeting room, her heart pounding as she faced the gathering. The chairs, filled with familiar faces from her community, resembled a sea of expectations, some curious, others skeptical, even hostile. This was the moment she had envisioned, where her efforts culminated in the educational workshops she had designed with Ethan. Yet the reality felt heavier than she anticipated. Years of burying her lineage's painful history weighed on her shoulders, yet each story she prepared to share was steeped in resilience and renewal. She cast her glance around the room, drawing strength from the sight of Ethan sitting among the audience, giving her an encouraging nod. His unwavering belief in their mission became a beacon of support, illuminating her resolve. As she began to speak, the air shifted. She introduced the workshop not merely as an exploration of a dark past but as a transformative journey, one that would invite them to learn from the threads of history that wove into the fabric of their community. Today, we honor those who were silenced, but more importantly, we embrace the strength we can derive from their stories, she stated, her voice steadying with each sentence. With a careful narrative, Virginia shared an account from her ancestor, a woman condemned under the weight of fear and misunderstanding. However, from that dark chapter blossomed tales of bravery and resistance, stories that transcended the pain, glowing with humanity. She interspersed this presentation with moments of vulnerability, allowing herself to confront her trepidations openly. Like many of you, I feared judgment when I uncovered my lineage. I feared alienation and resistance. But through this journey, I have learned that confronting our truths is what binds us together, she said, her eyes searching the room. An elderly gentleman shifted in his seat, visibly moved. This strategic connection forged a bridge between them, a reminder that they all shared a common humanity that defined their community more than any moment of strife. Conversation sparked, hands raised, questions asked, and soon the room transitioned from passive observers to engaged participants. Her courage in sharing even the most harrowing truths about their past resonated deeply. She had transformed potential backlash into an opportunity for understanding. We stand to gain so much when we face our history honestly. There's strength in storytelling, in opening our hearts to vulnerability, she continued. As she concluded her presentation, a dialogue naturally emerged, and rather than spewing hostility, critics began to share their thoughts, some admitting to long-standing misconceptions. She listened, validating their feelings while gently guiding the conversation towards empathy. It's not about assigning blame, it's about growing together, she implored. In that moment, Virginia realized something profound: her transformation was rippling outward. What once had been a personal struggle evolved into a communal journey of accountability and connection. Her confidence flourished as she navigated dissent, demonstrating mastery not just in historical facts but in human empathy. As the workshop drew to a close, acknowledgement washed over her. Several community members approached, sharing their own stories of ancestors, experiences that ran parallel to the thread she had woven into her narrative. They recognized her courage and offered their own vulnerabilities, creating a blossoming network of shared consciousness. Virginia left the meeting room that evening bolstered by what she had achieved. Resistance still lingered, of course there were still those who would rail against change. But she had ventured into the storm and emerged stronger, more capable, her voice echoed with authenticity. She had redefined her identity not just as a librarian beholden to tradition but as a storyteller weaving the rich narrative of those both lost and resilient. As she and Ethan walked home together, the sky painted hues of dusk, Virginia smiled. They had initiated a conversation and ignited a spark for deeper exploration. The realization of her growth filled her with satisfaction. She had conquered her fears and proven to herself and to Ethan that standing in truth could reshape legacies forged in silence. Her call to action resonated beyond the walls of the historical society. Virginia felt confident she could continue this journey, she could embrace change, sparking further dialogues as they reshaped the very narratives that had long confined them. In this moment of victory, she understood that transformation was not solely about triumphing over opposition. It was about learning to walk alongside those entrenched in fear, illuminating pathways of resilience through informed dialogue. Tomorrow awaited new challenges, but that was just the beginning of her commitment to this cause. For now, she celebrated the courage gained through vulnerability and the deep connections fostered through embracing the past. This was her achievement, a milestone attained, paving the way for personal and communal evolution. The future opened boundless possibilities, beckoning her to continue this work with renewed vigor. And in this moment, she turned to Ethan, his energy and insight igniting her spirit. Together, they could navigate the complexities of history, transforming silence into strength, one story at a time. Virginia smiled. She had embraced her destiny, earning the right to speak the truths long cloaked in shadows. As for the silence that once haunted her, she allowed it to fade into the fabric of their shared legacy, conversing instead in a language of hope, connection, and unwavering courage. Now, dear friends, if you too believe in the power of storytelling and the magnetic force of truth, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because your support is what fuels these journeys. Comment your reactions and theories about this remarkable transformation, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and understand the strength found in vulnerability. Don't wait even one more second to uplift the narratives that redefine our histories.